It's been 7 games, so you know what that means. Another edition of the Weekly Burn, the weekly podcast for the Orleans Firebirds. So you get to hear Ian Nicholas, Dylan Pescatore, and Sammy Miller for a little bit longer than you probably wanted to. Or maybe not. Maybe that's why you're here. Dylan, it's been a wild week. Firebirds sit at 10-10. They were 6-7 headed into this latest stretch, and they dropped one more game below 500 since the last time you and I got together and did one of these. 5-2 road loss to Katuitt on the road on the 26th in a bullpen that's been so good all season long. Kind of struggled that day.
It struggled that day. It's also struggled this week. You're going to have ups and downs of the season. And this past week has not only been historic, it's been very, like I said, up and down. You have wins, you have loss. It's been a lot of win and loss and not a lot of streaks. So this week has definitely been, not the bullpen that we saw at the start of the season for the Firebirds. But it's been reciprocated by an offense that has really kind of taken alive and scored a lot of runs and really gotten going this week. So you're going to have a down week for the bullpen, but the offense comes back and really has a strong week that has kind of carried them in some of the games.
So that Katuitt game, the offense wasn't really alive. The bullpen gave up 5 runs. That was all the runs. Katuitt needed to win that game 5-2. Then you move on to the Brewster game on the road. Third game against the Whitecaps this season. Orleans now 6-8. Offense didn't necessarily explode quite yet, but they got 11 hits and only turned into 3 runs, but the pitching was able to stabilize and get a win on the road against an East Division foe.
Yeah, and that game was all about Chad Gartland. It was his second start against Brewster. He both went on Wednesdays, I believe, and it was more of a fastball slider game rather than his splitter and forkball combination that was so dominant in his first start against Brewster. He only allowed 2 hits, 1 mistake, which was a home run to James Tibbs, but he kept it straight, kept it under 1 run, and continued on with his great dominant stretch. And then the bullpen, which had, like you said, a shaky game against Katuitt, came back and had a really good game. Derek Clark, Sam Leboki, who actually worked himself in a little bit of a jam. The rain came, remember? And he loaded the bases, hit by pitch, 2 hit by pitches and a walk, I believe. And with nobody out, guarding a 2-run lead, it kind of got a little bit shaky there for the Firebirds. But a strikeout, a flyout, and then another flyout got him out of that jam, only allowing 1 run. So that was big. It kind of changed the momentum in that game. And then Danny Carrion came on for the close. So the Orleans continued their dominance over the Whitecaps this season.
Yes, and Derek Clark also pitched well that game, 2 shutout innings. Chad Gartland no longer with the team, but the reigning A-10 pitcher of the year, George Mason, like you said, 2 great starts, finishes the summer with 11 innings pitched and just 2 earned runs given up. Over 3 appearances, also multi-hit games from Joe Oyama, to the surprise of nobody. That's what he's been doing all season long. And Jack Penny, who drove in 2 runs off 2 hits. But then Orleans returns home, Dylan, 7-8, and faces a Falmouth Commodores team that was struggling. They had lost 5-6 games in a row, and Orleans loses to them 4-3, and the offense only puts up 7 hits.
Well, it wasn't the offense that was the problem that day. It was the defense, right? You had multiple plays where the defense wasn't up to snuff, and off that, you give any team in this league, you can play Falmouth, Chatham, or you play a top team like Katuitt or YD or Harwich. If you make errors, you're going to have to bite the bullet. And that's what the Orleans Firebirds had. It was a bit of a letdown game against a team that was really struggling in Falmouth. But they weren't, they didn't play their greatest game either. The Commodores did not. It was just the Firebirds kind of let that one, slip away with their defense.
They did a couple errors, 3 to be exact, were the big reason why the Commodores scored 4 runs. All 4 of Falmouth's runs scored in that game were unearned. You don't see that too often. And ever since, the Commodores have kind of gotten back on track. 7-11-2 is their record. Not top in the league. It's still bottom in the West Division, but the Commodores have looked like a much better team since that road win against Orleans. But man, the Firebirds bounce back, facing a YD team that they had just beaten a few days earlier in that foggy game on Sunday where Sean Madsen was a hero, and we already went over that in the last episode of the podcast, but a 10-1 beatdown of the best team in the East Division, and the offense was sensational.
It was sensational, and it kind of went back to 2 days or 3 days earlier because of the off day, the Brewster game, right? The 3-2 win where the offense had upwards of 10 hits but only had 3 runs. This was a game that they really started to break out. I think this was a big game for 2 guys specifically. Jake Hyde and Owen Carpellotti as well, along with Johnny Olmstead. Johnny Olmstead had his best game of the season, no doubt about that. 4 hits for him. And then Jake Hyde, who put the team in front with a 2 RBI double to center field. So it was 2 guys who maybe didn't start off the season as they wanted to, but really got going in that game, and that was big, not only for the offense as a whole, but those 2 guys in particular.
And then Daniel Avidia also set the tone early on, and often 6 innings pitched, his longest start of the summer for the Grand Canyon Star, gave up just 1 hit, no runs, 4 strikeouts. Avidia, 4 starts into the summer, a 0.47 ERA.
And only on 67 pitches as well. So efficient.
Super efficient. He continues to feast and should continue to feast over the next couple weeks for Orleans. Tried to swing that momentum into a West Division showdown with Bourne. And in another wonky game, a 6-5 loss. Orleans had opportunities early on. Dylan, Marcus Morgan, the starter for the Braves that day, had 7 walks through 5 innings on the mound. Actually, only 4 innings on the mound. That hurt them, but it could have hurt Bourne a lot more.
It should have. It truly should have. And we were, of course, doing the game. 2 runs for Orleans in that first inning, both coming off wild pitches. Morgan could not find the strike zone if he had a map. And 2 runs came in for the Firebirds, but that was it. And it felt like they left a lot of meat on the bone. It was bases loaded with nobody out. And then Penny had a blooper in the left field that got caught. A double play by Jake Hyde. He hit the ball maybe 100+ miles per hour. But it was right at the shortstop, Vastine. He turned the double play, unlucky for the Firebirds. But that game really felt like a knife to the heart. It did, because that was the first late loss in terms of blowing a lead for the Firebirds. Remember, top of the 8th, Andy Blake had an RBI single with 2 outs to put them up 2 runs. And then Connor Eaton came in, was a little bit unlucky with infield singles. And the defense once again let them down. 4 runs in the 8th for Bourne. Firebirds put up 1 in the top of the 9th, but it wasn't enough.
It was also another great game, not only for Joe Oyama, but Johnny Olmstead, who had 6 hits in those last 2 games. The win against YD, the loss to Bourne. The USC infielder really started to find his footing in that stretch. But Orleans, like you said, that was kind of a tough game because you had the big win against YD, then you lose to Bourne. It was following a similar trend, 4-4 in your last 8 games, and you hadn't had a single win streak in there. It was just step forward, step backwards. But then you take that step forward again at home against Wareham, and what a game it was. 7-6, a walk-off winner from Johnny Olmstead, but nearly a blown game that Orleans was able to crumble together late, salvage, the rest of that ball game, and get out of there with a win.
Yeah, it was a crazy one. They were up 4-0, the Firebirds were, and it was smooth sailing. Then Wareham, which at the time and still is the best offensive team in the league in terms of runs scored, they had a lot of opportunities. They got right back in the game, and then they took the lead, like you said, Ian. A bases-loaded 2-out opportunity for them. Pop up into the dark night sky in Orleans, and no one could find it. Ball drops, 3-run score, and it just seemed like the Firebirds were shocked and confused about how they were losing that game after leading 4-0. Eventually, they came back in the bottom of the inning, which I felt was a huge turning point. Big in their resilience factor as well. Scoring the run, Joe Oyama with the sac fly almost got out for a grand slam, tied the game, and then Johnny Olmstead came up as the hero in the bottom of the 9th.
That he did. And then Orleans trying to translate that into what could have been a monumental win against a team named the Hyannis Harbor Hawks, the same team that Orleans beat to start the season. Obviously, a lot was on the line just because you hope to win back-to-back games at Eldridge Park. You hope to finally snap this win-loss streak, but also win number 400 in the long career of legendary manager Kelly Nicholson was on the line, and everybody knew it headed into the game. And you know what, Dylan? The guys got it done from Eldridge Park. 8-6, unbelievable ball game. 27 hits combined between these two teams. Hyannis was showing some of the pre-4th of July fireworks early with a couple home runs. But again, Orleans showed some resiliency and got a little bit lucky with a weird 7th inning, which led to 4 Firebird runs.
You could say weird, but I also think that game was big. I mentioned the 2 guys earlier. That game showed why anyone in the Firebirds order can come up big on any given night. How did that game start, right? Henry Hunter with his first extra base hit of the season, and it went over the fence for a 2-run home run. And then after Hyannis puts up 4 in that 3rd inning against Dylan Jacobs, who's mostly been really good for this team. He had a bad day. Right back, Eddie King Jr., 2 RBI single to tie the game at 4. The offense just continues to come back. Remember at the start of the season, Ian, we talked about the pitching bailing out the offense that was struggling. This week, it felt like the offense was bailing out the pitching that was struggling.
It was. And, the offense had a lot of great individual performances this week. We got to name Birds Baller of the Week. It could be Matt Hallback, who's been, 6 for 11 over his last 2 games. It could be Andy Blake, certainly, 10 for 22 with 7 runs driven in. Johnny Olmstead, what a turnaround he's had to his season with 9 hits on 21 at-bats and 6 runs driven in. But with that milestone, with win number 400 in his 18th year at the helm of the Firebirds, I know he probably would hate it to be about himself, but we've got to name Kelly Nicholson the Birds Baller of the Week.
How couldn't you, right? 400 wins, such a historic milestone. And that's all you can say. I mean, congratulations to Coach. He's been here for upwards of 17, 18 years as the manager, as well as the assistant coach. So I can't even put it into words what it means to him, impacting so many players' lives and really just building them up. I mean, we saw the congratulatory video that was made for him, upwards of 6 minutes. You had guys in the MLB like Burns from the Brewers and Colton Wong and MLB guys that everyone knows about all came from Eldridge Park under Kelly Nicholson.
They did. Kelly Nicholson, in his 18th season, ever since 2005, he has been skip for Orleans. He has been the Firebirds organization through and through. And the third member of our crew, Sammy Miller, caught up with Coach Nicholson right after that big win.
I am now joined alongside Kelly Nicholson. Coach, congratulations. 400 regular season wins. When I say that number, how does it feel?
Feel old. I think back to the 2005 team and, all the players that have been here, and that numbers is all about team. We've been fortunate to have really good players. It's a tip of the cap to all the college coaches that have sent us those players, scouts, agents, parents, players themselves. We've had unbelievable assistant coaches. So that it's a team thing. I think everybody knows that. I'm just happy we got number 10 tonight, Sammy. That felt good to get number 10 for these guys. But it feels good to do it with this group because this is a really good group, bunch of good players, high character players. So I'm kind of glad we got it out of the way tonight, to be honest with you.
And after the win, you were celebrating. You gave a handshake to every single coach and every single player. How special was that to really embrace with them?
That's what it's all about. I think everybody that I talked to that asked me about the Cape League, it's all about relationships. It's conversations like this, and have my wife here to support me the last dozen years, I think. It's not easy on her, right? She drops me off at 1, and I say, see you at 11. And, for 10 hours a day, for 60 days during the summers, she's alone, and she supports it, and I couldn't do it without her.
Thanks, Sammy. If you want to check out the full interview with Coach K, you can. It's on our YouTube channel, Orleans Firebirds, where, again, on the Birds Broadcast Network, you can catch us whenever, wherever you need to find some live Orleans Firebirds baseball. But Dylan, Coach Kelly Nicholson, our Birds Baller of the Week, that doesn't mean that some of his players didn't shine. And if we did have to highlight one guy in particular as who was the best over the last 7 games, who would it be?
There's so many options. I mean, you have 3 guys in the last 7 days in the Cape Cod Baseball League that are top 8 in terms of batting average. Matt Hallback, number 1. Andy Blake and Johnny Olmstead. It's such a hard decision, but I got to go with Andy Blake. He's been clutch for this team. He's gotten multiple big hits for this team. He's also played really good defense as well. His first time in the outfield before probably middle school, maybe even elementary school, in Little League. He did not play the outfield in high school. He did not play the outfield in college. He's playing the outfield for Orleans and is playing it really, really well. Took away a home run the other night. Continues to make great plays as well. So Andy Blake, not only what he brings to the plate with a .455 average, along with 10 hits, and continues on to be that RBI master, the nickname that he's gotten, 7 RBIs in the last 5 games from Mr. Blake. He is my player on the field, Baller of the Week.
That's a pretty good bet. I mean, 8 games in a row, the reigning Ivy League Player of the Year at Columbia has a hit, including 3 multi-hit games, back-to-back games with 3 hits each, and all of that doesn't even include a little run that sparked the success that he's having, where he had 6 hits in a 2-game stretch a couple weeks back against Brewster. Andy Blake has been fantastic, and again, playing a position he had barely played in his life before. One of the best shortstops in the country a year ago at Columbia, hoping to do it next year at Duke, hoping to do it a little bit longer this summer with Orleans. Dylan, you look at the schedule ahead, a lot of important games for the East Division standings. Right now, the Birds, 10-10 overall on a 2-game win streak. First win streak since that 3-game skid to break a 5-game skid earlier on in the year. But now, Orleans has an opportunity, if it plays really good baseball like it has over the last 2 games, to be number 1 in the East sooner rather than later. Only 3 points back of YD at 1, 11-8-1, and then 11-9, Harwich is number 2. And over the next week, Orleans not only gets to play Harwich, also gets to play Chatham and Brewster. Those are all going to be important games.
You always want to win your divisional games, right? And winning, of course, that impact immediately. You have a win for Orleans. They call it a 4-point game, right? You get 2, the other team doesn't. You go up. So I think there are a few must-wins. It feels like this team plays up to bigger opponents. And I mean bigger opponents as in better teams. We saw a loss to Falmouth the other day, where it kind of felt like a letdown game. But you have to beat the teams that you are above in the standings, that you feel you're better than, but also beat the better teams. And I think that the pitching really allowed them to do so earlier in the season. But now it's how much can the offense continue to not carry this team, but have a big impact in a lot of their wins, because they didn't earlier in the season, but now they're really putting up upwards of 10 hits a night and 7-8 runs, and it just feels like this team is really getting going on the offensive side.
Double-digit hits for Orleans in each of the last 2 games, both of them wins against West Division teams in Wareham and Hyannis, but tonight it's Chatham, and Orleans has somehow only played Chatham once this season, and the offense had, 1-2 hits on the whole game, 1 hit on the entirety of the game. A lot has changed since then. Orleans playing good baseball. Chatham, currently 6-13-1. They sit towards the bottom of the East Division standings. They were supposed to play yesterday on the 4th of July. That got rained out. Now they're at Veterans Field tonight. What would you like to see continue tonight for Orleans, who will most likely have Evan Truitt on the mound?
I've noticed that in a lot of the losses where the offense has really gotten going and the pitching has, for the most part, kind of held their own, what has been the difference for the Firebirds between wins and losses? Their defense. So I really would like to see from this week, from not just tonight, but this week, clean defensive games, because giving up runs is just the worst way to lose, especially when it's routine plays. So playing clean defense, the offense can continue on. A few guys who can really start to get hot. I look at Eddie King, I look at Jake Hyde, maybe continued on with Oyama and Hallback and Blake. I think this lineup is completely full. And maybe a little bit of a bounce-back week. Maybe not up to his standards for Eddie Micheletti Jr. A lot of walks in there. But if a little bit of a bounce-back week for him would definitely be helpful for the Firebirds in this week coming up, which is a big one.
Eddie Micheletti batting 5th, playing in left tonight. Eddie King Jr. in center field batting 6th. A couple of the guys Dylan highlighted that hopefully perform well against the Chatham A's tonight from Veterans Field at 7 o'clock. You can catch us on the Birds Broadcast Network with a little like and subscription to the Orleans Firebirds YouTube at 6:45 for the scorching start with Dylan and Sammy and myself, Ian Nicholas. You know where to find us. You know where to hear us. And thanks so much for listening to the latest edition of the Weekly Burn. We'll be back in about a week's time where who knows where the Birds will be and who knows where you will be. Hopefully right back here.